Just go ahead and cremate him and come back home, would you? After finishing my father's funeral, I made a tearful call back home. Elvira, my eldest son's wife, screamed into her phone so loud it seemed like it might burst. Look, if you don't come back now, we'll have to cancel David's beauty salon appointment. What's more important to you, a dead old man or your young grandson? That's when something inside me snapped. How dare she refer to my dearly departed father as just some old man? I've been quiet and obedient until now, but I've reached my limit. Sarah, is something wrong? I turned around to find Jacob, my late husband's adored junior colleague, standing there. Jake, I have to go home. Aren't they starting the cremation soon? When I told him about Elvira, his expression changed immediately. His eyes filled with anger. Sarah, you don't have to go, I'll talk to her. Without waiting for my reply, Jake turned and sprinted away. I thought of calling him back, but then reconsidered. If Jake's genuinely angry, my daughter-in-law won't get off easily. Well, maybe that's for the best. She didn't even allow me to pick up my father's remains and was trying to boss me around. Let's consider Jake's sudden intervention as a bolt from the blue. There's a thing called karma, after all. I'm Sarah, a 55-year-old administrative assistant at a pharmacy. Since losing my husband 6 years ago, my life was peaceful living with my eldest son, Elliot, until he got married. He works factory shifts that don't align with my schedule, but life was tranquil. The tides turned about 4 years ago. My eldest son suddenly announced he was getting married. Turns out his girlfriend was already pregnant. Things just sort of flowed that way. On our third date, you could say we were blessed with a baby. Third date? You've barely been together. What can you do? A child is on the way. There wasn't much I could say to that. My daughter-in-law had lost her parents at a young age and had no one else to rely on for her first childbirth, so they moved into my house. Having a stranger in my home didn't sit well with me, but given the circumstance, I couldn't say no. After moving in, my daughter-in-law started out humble enough, but that changed after giving birth. I've shown mother-in-law her grandchild's face, and one day, I'll be the one taking care of her. I'm busy with a baby, so you can handle all the household chores. She became pretty brazen about it, complaining if meals, laundry or cleaning fell behind. I thought it would change as baby David grew, but even at 3 years old, it hasn't. I've put up with her because, well, what else can you do? Any mention of helping out is met with, nonsense. Do you realize if anything happens to you, mother-in-law, I'm the one who has to look after you? Well, yes, but let me focus on work and raising my child for now. You've got everything else, right? She calls herself an illustrator. She does have some gigs, but she's an unqualified freelancer who doesn't even handle her taxes properly. She neglects parenting too. For some reason, she insists on bathing the child herself, but beyond that, she doesn't seem to care much. She shows zero concern for my son, who's burning the candle at both ends with his 3-shift job. All she seems to care about is her long, straight hair, which she treats at expensive beauty salons. In my ease, there's a growing rift between my son and his wife, but they have a child, so I've been biting my tongue and making do. My 80-year-old father has lived alone ever since my mother passed away. Living with you would make me too dependent and weaken me. It's better to tough it out alone. No matter how many times I've offered to live together, he stubbornly refused. I could tell he didn't want to burden me, his thoughtfulness shining through his words as if I would ever consider it a burden. I've always adored my dad. Since I was a kid, he was laid back, never sweating the small stuff. When Mom crashed his car into the fence or when I spent the night out with my first love, he would just laugh it off. The only time he would get really mad was when I bothered other people. Every morning we'd text each other to make sure we were both okay. Dad had worked hard to learn how to use his smartphone, mastering his messaging app. Whoever woke up first would send a sticker, and we replied to confirm we were both well. It was our morning ritual. But that morning, there was no reply from Dad. Usually, I'd get a sticker of a smiling son, his favorite. Even calling him got no response. Worried, I sped to my parents' home before heading to work. I unlocked the door with trembling hands, rushed inside, and found my dad. Dad! Dad! He was lying in the hallway, clutching his chest. I hurried over, but he was already gone. Dad! Dad! By the time I was desperately calling out to him, he had already passed away. Overwhelmed with grief, I couldn't do anything but cry. My eldest brother, Elliot, took care of the funeral arrangements. Thanks, Elliot. No worries, it was sudden. Let me handle it. You stay with Mom. While Elliot was considerate, his wife didn't even come to see my dad's face. Funerals are just a hassle with small children. David and I won't be coming, she had promptly informed me. In my state, I didn't have the energy to be angry about her behavior. It was a small family funeral, with only about 10 relatives attending. Even without her, it wouldn't cause a stir. Or so I thought. The day of the funeral was cloudless, reflecting my dad's sunny disposition. As the minister spoke, I alternated between looking at my dad's photo and his coffin, tears flowing without end. Amid my grief, I noticed something odd. My brother Elliot's pocket kept vibrating again and again. Before the ceremony, I had given him my phone to hold because my mourning clothes didn't have pockets. Clearly, he was curious but couldn't check during the funeral. In the end, it had to wait. Mom, it's from Alvara, said Elliot, handing me my phone after the ceremony. It was filled with missed calls from his wife. Alvara only calls me when she needs something. I wonder if something happened to David. Elliot mused, his face serious. Well, I'll give her a call then, I said, moving to a corner in the hallway to make the call. The phone hardly rang before my eldest son's wife picked up. Do you have any idea how many times I've called you? I'm sorry. I was at a funeral, I explained. What's going on? Right after I said that, a piercing voice filled my ears. Today is David's appointment. Come home and drive him there now, she demanded. I didn't immediately understand what she meant. Okay, I reflexively responded. Then it dawned on me what she was demanding. She wants me to leave my own father's funeral to take my grandson to a beauty salon. But I can't. My father's cremation is about to start. I can't take David today, I explained. What cremation? Your grandpa isn't coming back, you know, she retorted. Really? Did you just say that, Alvara? It's inappropriate to call my father's cremation that. Just let them burn him and come back home, I objected. Ignoring my objections, my eldest son's wife ranted on. If you don't come, David's appointment will be cancelled. Who's more important, a departed elder or a young grandchild? I can't believe you. Just come home right now, she concluded and hung up. I was at a loss for what to do next as I stood there bewildered, forgetting to even lower my phone. A voice called out from behind me. Cesa, is everything okay? It was Jake, my late husband's devoted junior colleague. He still visits my husband's grave every year on the anniversary of his death. A very beautiful young man, he can be quite intimidating when angered, but he's always treated me with the same respect and care as he did my husband. Today, he came to the funeral because he felt that my father was like a parent to him as well. Jake, I have to go. Isn't the cremation starting soon? My daughter-in-law insists I take my grandson to a beauty salon now. What's going on? I explained to the shocked Jake about Alvara's rude attitude and the recent conversation, how she tries to boss me around and treats me with arrogance, and how she had the audacity to call my father a dead old man. Sarah, don't worry about going. I'll talk to my wife. Fuming, Jackie immediately turned back and took off running, knowing Jackie, he probably didn't actually go to chat with his wife. Mom, are you okay? My eldest son, who came over as if on cue, gets a quick rundown of what just happened. So Jake stormed off home, right? He asked. Yes, if Alvara angered Jake, that could be a problem. Well, if that's the case, it's on Alvara, isn't it? It seems like my eldest son has no intention of stopping Jake either. In the end, I stayed to see through the cremation and the collection of my father's ashes as planned. I only returned home after placing my father's urn on the family altar. I had planned to stay at my parents' home for a while because it felt lonely to leave my dad's ashes alone. But I had forgotten a few things. Plus, I was concerned about my daughter-in-law. Don't worry too much about Alvara, said my eldest son, gripping the steering wheel with restrained anger. I don't know what she'll say when we get back, but it's absurd to ask me to come home during Grandpa's funeral. It's really gotten to me, about Alvara. Yeah, she dumps all the housework on you and has even yelled at David enough to make him cry. I'm thinking of considering divorce as an option moving forward. Hearing the word divorce from my son leaves me conflicted. Our grandchild is still young. Can they really separate just like that? But I too am fed up with living with my daughter-in-law. I have my concerns, but I won't oppose a divorce. In the end, I only told that much to my eldest son, Elliot. They're a married couple. They should do what makes both of them happy. But how did it come to this? I lost my husband, and my son's marriage isn't going well. My father, who was always there for me, has been reduced to a small pile of ashes. Thinking about it all, I couldn't stop my tears. I'm sorry, Elliot. Can I just cry for a bit? With that said, I cried loudly until we reached home. When we got home, the entrance was a mess. The potted plant that had been on the shoe rack had fallen over, and sandals and shoes were scattered everywhere. Even the welcome mat had been flung to the middle of the hallway. Jake really did lose his temper, my eldest son remarked with disbelief as he took off his shoes. If you get Jake seriously angry, it's a big deal. But Alira is the one at fault, so it can't be helped. With that, we walked into the living room to find my daughter-in-law sitting on the sofa, visibly stunned as we entered. She slowly turned her face toward us. Her expression was just as I had expected. There was no doubt she had been hit by an infuriated Jake. You guys? She slowly stood up as she looked at us. Judging by her steady stance, it seemed she had only been hit in the face. You think it's okay to send a guy like that after me? Isn't that criminal? I didn't send him. I just told him what you've been doing to me, Alvira, and, well, he got angry. Who wouldn't? Excuse me? You think I deserve to get punched? What is he, a gangster? He is a real one. At my reply, my daughter-in-law shut her mouth. My late husband was a gangster's son. The man who came earlier was one of his juniors. He respects me. What did you just say? I told him how you've been treating me, Alvira, and how you told me to skip my father's cremation. That's why he got so mad. As I finished speaking, a loud cry rang out. I turned to find my little grandson, who had seemingly appeared out of nowhere, crying by the door. Rushing over, I scooped him into my arms. Granny, I'm scared. I'm so sorry, little Sue. I take my grandson to my room to calm him down. Though his tears stop, he clings to me. That's when I notice a small bruise on the back of his neck. What could have caused this? As I ponder, my son, wearing a serious expression, enters the room. I'm going to stay at my parents' house for a while, I blurt out as I pass him our child. I want to distance myself from my daughter-in-law as soon as possible. I get it. I don't want to be around Alira either. Okay, I'll handle Alvira. Don't worry. Thank you. Please do. Quickly, I pack a suitcase with the essentials. All the while, my thoughts are racing. The ongoing arrogance from my daughter-in-law since she moved in, her cold indifference to my hardworking son's health, her audacity to demand that I pick up my grandson during my father's funeral, and her harsh words to my father. What Jake did might be socially frowned upon, but it was a relief for me. Today is the day for my son to go to his beauty salon. Get home right now and drive him there. I suddenly remember the piercing voice of my eldest son's wife over the phone, a voice cold as steel, void of any warmth. Honestly, I didn't care what she or anyone else had to say. In fact, I was even grateful to Jake for his actions. The next day, my eldest son called me while I was staying at my parents' home. Mom, can you come home now? Right now? As soon as you can? There's something important we need to discuss while David is at daycare. His voice carried an ominous tone. Feeling that this was no small matter, I sped home. As I burst into the living room, I found my son looking more serious than I'd ever seen, sitting next to his wife on the sofa. Mom, sorry for calling you like this. What's going on? Elvira has been doing something terrible to David. Terrible? That's when it hit me. I remembered the small bruise on the back of my grandson's neck from yesterday. Elvira always insists on giving him his bath herself. Could it be? I found bruises on David's neck and arms, and when I took off his shirt, I found them all over his body. That I confronted Elvira, and she admitted to pinching and jabbing David frequently. It's too much for a small child. Elvira's eyes widened. Her expression confirmed the truth of my son's words. A renewed and fiercer anger welled up within me. Her arrogant attitude and the coldness towards my son were somewhat mitigated by Jake's actions, but doing something so cruel to my tiny grandson? Unforgivable. That's something I will never, ever forgive. I'll forget what you did to me and Elliot after yesterday's events, but I will never forgive you for hurting David. What are you going to do? David is my son, not your mother-in-law's son. What's your point? David is my treasure. I can't have a daughter-in-law who harms him. Leave our home now. As I raised my voice, Alira looked at me with fear for the first time. My son then picked up where I left off. We're getting a divorce, Elvira. Your arrogant behavior towards Mom and the disrespectful attitude towards Grandpa were terrible enough, but I won't ever forgive what you did to David. We're divorcing right now. Understand? At his words, the color drained from Elvira's face. Divorce? Wait a minute. If you do that, I'll have nowhere to go. Fine. Do whatever you want. Once I tell David what you've been up to, you won't be welcome here anymore. Mom already said you should leave. I haven't had any illustration work for the past 6 months. What am I supposed to do if you kick me out? The daughter-in-law broke down crying like a small child. There was no trace of arrogance or tyranny in her demeanor. You brought this on yourself. If you don't leave, I'll tell that man what you did to David. Upon hearing my threat, my daughter-in-law clutched her head and started shaking, her face a mess ruined by tears and a runny nose. Stop it, okay? I get it. I'll leave. So, this means we're getting a divorce? My son asked for confirmation. His wife glanced between the two of us and slowly nodded. In the discussions that followed, they did divorce, and my son retained custody of our grandchild. Coincidentally, the tax authorities also started investigating her. She hadn't filed taxes in years despite her freelance work. As expected, she now faced significant back taxes and penalties. Finding a new place was tough for her. She finally settled into an old, run-down apartment. After the divorce, she's juggling multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet and pay off her tax debt. I saw her once on the street. She looked as though she had aged 20 years. My grandchild reaches out to me with the most adorable smile when I pick them up. They hug me tightly. You know what? What is it, David? Really, really loves Grandma. When my grandson says something like that, the heaviness in my heart from losing my father begins to melt away. My divorced eldest son, Elliot, sends David to daycare when he works daytime shifts. But when he's on evening or night shifts, he relies on me to take care of the little guy. Weekdays can be a bit hectic, but time spent with my grandson is always a joy. I can't keep mourning my father forever. There are plenty of responsibilities that come with supporting Elliot.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.